Welcome to another episode of Graceful Curiosity. I'm Henry,
I'm Michael.
and Michael's back. You
That's right.
didn't you didn't have to hear more ramblings about Henry and his cat, and whatever else I was talking about in the what happens in the office.
Mm,
It just
hmm
happens in the office.
That's right.
So you know, well, first and foremost, we hope all of y'all have a really good Thanksgiving. That's tomorrow. So just our blessings to you and your family. I know family can be a little stressful, Michael.
It can.
You know, I'm mentally preparing myself because I got two houses to go to for
Right.
Thanksgiving.
hmm
So I don't know for you what because I guess you have the same situation. You have both
Yeah.
family in town.
Yeah, that's right. We have to make our rounds.
Yeah, but it's a blessing and a curse. I feel like it just feels overwhelming during the holiday season, right?
hmm
Where it's just like you have to because like I think we take for granted. I imagine it matters a lot more to you because you got children. Having both family in town is probably a very helpful thing.
hmm
But I think sometimes we take for granted how close family is.
Yeah.
You know, because his family is a big part of my life. Um, so like I have my grandparents and my uncle coming down from Oklahoma.
hmm
The Okies are coming to town.
I see.
But we're gonna have some good quality time. You
Mhm.
know, I guess the dread more comes from just like the social battery just depleting, you know what I mean?
Sure. Sure.
So, um, what do you guys have planned?
Yeah. Well, we have probably two two visits to make, probably to my parents and then Elizabeth's family as well, and that's usually a huge gathering. So yeah, we'll be spending, I'm sure, most of Thursday over at the in-laws' house.
Oh, very
hmm
cool. Yeah. Um, we got a zoo trip in our, they want
Okay.
to they want to go see what Emily, since Emily's working at a different apartment now,
Yeah. Yeah.
go see, her animals.
The
So
big cats.
the big cats. And here's your little, PSA. There's a new baby jaguar at the Houston Zoo,
That's right.
but you can't see it yet. I'm sorry. But there is a new baby elephant, so you can see
Hmm.
that. I think it's out on exhibit already,
Hmm.
because like they come out as a giant.
Right.
They weigh like the baby weighs more than us already,
Yeah.
Michael, and it's a week old. You know,
Wow. Yeah, that's
so
amazing.
that's elephants for you.
Absolutely. Wow.
Well, with Thanksgiving being tomorrow, that means Sunday is the beginning of A, the church calendar,
Mm,
and B, Advent.
hmm hmm
Um, which it kind of feels appropriate that Advent's first in the church calendar,
hmm
even though it's like the end of our calendar,
Right.
because it is the birth of Jesus, and we kind of, you know, it's kind of the life of the church is kind of the church calendar, if you
hmm
think about it.
Yeah.
We go from Advent, then we're shooting towards, you know, Easter and Holy Week, and then it's the life of the disciples without Jesus is pretty much the rest of the church calendar and the church forming and all of
Right.
that. So it's kind of appropriate, I
hmm
think, that Advent starts it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, really the birth of Christ is in a certain sense, right? The birth of the faith, that
Yeah.
everything flows from his incarnation as Jesus of Nazareth in Bethlehem. So that's only natural for the church year to flow from the beginning of the narrative of his life,
Mm.
which is, of course, his birth.
Yeah. And Advent is also it's an interesting word because it means coming,
hmm
and it has at least for modern day audience, because I was doing my research,
Yeah.
modern day audience, you know, we focus in the church both of the first coming, but the
hmm
eventual coming to come.
Right.
But so here's your nerdy part of because we'll talk a little bit about the history of Advent, but the history of Advent, the beginning, because they don't really know when exactly it started, but they think about the third or fourth century.
hmm
Um, but Christians back then, when they started Advent, there's no mention of baby Jesus.
Hmm.
It was all about the second coming.
Interesting. Yeah.
Even though they did celebrate the birth of Jesus with Christmas,
Mm.
but it's about because there's a what I love about church history is that
Yeah.
there's an intentionality.
Hmm.
So I guess liturgy in general, there's intentionality of it
Hmm.
all. And this part of the year is the darkest, right?
Yeah.
So the intentionality behind Advent is that there's light peeking through the darkness.
Hmm.
So that's the idea there with why it's where it is, right?
Hmm.
So um, that's what the original church, that's what they thought of with the focusing of the second coming, because you know, they were they're new kids on the block. They were hated on. They were
Mm.
killed,
Mm.
and all of that. So like this season of celebration of Jesus coming in judgment and defeating evil.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's kind of a hope. It's a big
Right.
hope because I think we focus so much on on the cross and the resurrection and all
Hmm.
of that.
Hmm.
So that's our hope. We don't think about the future hope. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, because yeah, I think when we look at Advent in its deepest dimensions, right, it's not, just as you were saying, not simply about Jesus' birth 2,000 years ago in Bethlehem, but it encapsulates in many ways the significance of his life,
Hmm.
right, as the Messiah and Savior of the world.
Yeah.
And that just as we proclaim in the creed every single week, he is coming again,
Yeah.
right? To judge the living and the dead, as we say, and to set this world right from
Yeah.
the captivity of sin that it is in. So Advent really has that, not only that dimension of looking to the past, right, but also to the present in the sense that we are contemplating what Jesus has done, what he will do. In a sense, we're receiving him anew every day, right? And then, of course, as you were saying, it has the future dimension where we are looking forward in hope to the consummation of history when he returns and rights all wrongs, heals all wounds, brings humanity into the peace of God for all eternity.
Yeah.
So it's just an extraordinarily beautiful tradition that, in many ways, encapsulates the whole Christian narrative, right? Not just Jesus' birth.
Yeah. And you could say because us as a liturgical people, I think liturgical people really focus on ancient future.
Mm,
And I think starting off the church calendar with this is really leaning into
yeah,
the ancient future of the church. And what if you don't know what that means? It means like it's like a celebration of the people of the past, people of the present, the people of the future that are doing the same thing that you're doing right there. The
right.
church all the church that's around you saying the same thing that you said. The same church for centuries has been saying it, and the same church for the centuries to come is
Yeah.
saying it. So I'm a big ancient future guy. I love that's one of the reasons. I don't know if we've ever talked about it on an episode, but that's a
Mm,
big reason why I love liturgy.
hmm.
Is that
Yeah.
ancient future?
Yeah. I think that's a great point because participating in a tradition, a liturgical tradition, allows you to be a part of this grand narrative that, just as you said, existed before you were born for centuries and centuries and will likely exist probably long after you pass away, right?
Yeah,
That we're part of this historical continuity of worshiping God through these beautiful and ancient words of the liturgy,
mm,
you know. So that continuity that you mentioned is such probably one of the greatest features of liturgical worship.
yeah, yeah. Well, with tradition, so I guess Michael, a good place to start would be what's different about church during Advent? What are the
Mm,
traditions that we hold to? Because it's
hmm.
for this, what seems like, pending on the year,
Yeah.
about a month's time. What
Hmm.
are the traditions that
Yeah.
change?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of more minute changes that you can probably get into.
Like
But
the opening acclamation that
mhm,
changes. That's like
yeah,
very small, very
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. But yeah, probably the most significant symbol of Advent, right, is the Advent wreath,
Yeah.
which contains the candles, the multicolored candles that you see during the season. And each Sunday, a different candle is lit, and it really reflects a certain attribute of this season, and of course, of what it is meant to symbolize. So as you can see here on our board, we referenced the four primary candles that are lit. The first purple candle references hope. The second, peace. The third, the unique one, the pink candle, joy. And finally, the fourth purple candle, love.
Mm.
And so those qualities are things that we dwell on in a really special and unique and profound way during those Sundays of Advent.
Mm.
And so that's probably the most visible kind of outward reflection of what we're focusing on during that Advent season.
Yeah. But don't the colors change as well
Mm-hmm.
within the everything as well, like the priest garbs and the. I
Yep.
know we don't have it here, but I know some churches have linen that change
Yeah.
colors.
Mm-hmm.
What's the significance of, I guess, because I know with Advent candle, the Advent wreath as well,
Mm-hmm.
that the purple can sometimes be blue.
Yeah.
Same thing with the liturgical; it's either blue or purple.
Right.
You know,
That's right.
so
Yeah.
what's the significance of that
Mm-hmm.
change?
Well, I think most apparently is the purple um, historically represents royalty,
Yeah.
right? And so, in this season where we are welcoming the coming of the Messiah, the King Jesus,
Mm.
our vestments and linens, as you were referring to, really are meant to reflect that,
Yeah.
and that we are welcoming the coming of the one true King,
Yeah.
who is the Christ.
Mm. Very cool. Is there any other traditions you can think of that, um, during the church during
Mm-hmm.
this season? Is there any
Mm-hmm.
other ones you can think of?
I mean, I'm sure there's many different kind of smaller variations and things. Did you have something in mind
Well, because
specifically?
I think a big thing we notice
Yeah.
is the changing of the songs,
Mm, mm.
um, which if you go to a it's kind of funny I'm saying like real liturgical church. Maybe a better word would be like a hardcore liturgical church.
Sure. Yeah.
Only certain Christmas carols are
Uh,
played, but they have to not like so. There is intentionality in the music, right?
mm,
Like for us at Grace, the big one we play is "O Come, O Come, Emmanuel,"
yeah.
but that's Jesus hasn't arrived yet.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
the Christmas carols that can be played, or if you want to retake them and call them Advent carols, I don't know, or
Mm,
the hymns or what
mm.
have you, during this time, they're about waiting and the anticipation.
Yeah.
Because then, after these 4 weeks,
Mm.
they flip again. Because now the carols change to now he's arrived.
Right. Right.
So,
That's right.
because that's a big part of liturgical worship, even though is the worship, the musical worship part
Mm.
as well. Because the same thing can be said when we do Lent
Yeah.
or do Holy Week. Like the songs change
Mm.
in what they're talking about or like the focal point. I know at least here at Grace, we try to curate the songs
Mm.
with the
Mm.
seasons because they may not all be old hymns or old
Mm.
carols or
Mm.
something like that. But we try to curate a little bit on the thematics of the season.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know, and like I said earlier, outside of the music, there's like the opening acclamation changes as well. Um, we're a little lower church here, so there's not as many
Mm.
changes in tradition that happened. Um, so um, yeah, I think that's about all the tradition. So the colors change.
Mm.
The big part is the reef, and then we have the changing of the style of music and the thematics of the music.
Mm.
So I think that's kind of like the outward,
Right. Right.
expression of it all.
Mhm. Yeah, it's also interesting to note that historically, a lot of Christians picked up the discipline of fasting
Mm,
for significant parts of the Advent season as well, sort
mm,
of similar to what's done during Lent, as
yeah,
we're all familiar with.
yeah,
But the idea of preparing oneself through, this physical discipline as participating in the spiritual preparation
yeah.
for Christ's coming as well. That's another sort of unique aspect of the disciplines that are practiced during Advent.
Yeah, which that might be a good transition point of
Mm-hmm.
like, because, we're talking about the outward liturgical Sunday traditions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then what are the spiritual traditions
Yeah.
that we should participate outside of the Sunday worship?
Hmm. Yeah, well, I think there's, of course, many different ways of preparing oneself, as it were, preparing one's heart for the coming of Christ. But I think, as with the other significant holy days in the church calendar, Advent really is a time of reflection
Hmm,
about the significance of Christ, of the work of Christ, the accomplishment of Christ, the obedience of Christ in what he did in his life, death, and resurrection for all humanity. And this period allows us to kind of step back, right,
hmm,
from the busyness and the chaos of ordinary time, as it were, and devote ourselves to reflection and contemplation of all that God has done for us,
yeah,
most significantly through Jesus.
yeah. Because I think the spiritual disciplines that we're talking about of Advent kind of attack the commercialization of this season.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
like the worldliness is like, get things done,
Right.
get these done. Whether it's for like family with the Christmas season, with
Hmm.
shopping and all of that,
Hmm.
or like, at a job, getting everything in before the end of the year,
Yeah.
whatever that may be. I feel like the spiritual disciplines of waiting and reflecting
Yeah.
is basically like, so the world tells you we got to go, 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 go,
Yeah.
go, but God's saying, let's slow down.
Yes.
So I think God probably, God could be like, peer through the veil and be like, they're going to need this,
Yeah.
and kind
Yeah.
of set these types of things up.
Hmm.
So I think
Hmm.
it's, um, the church fathers probably didn't know what they were doing for the future church, but God knew, I
Hmm.
imagine. And
Hmm.
that's kind of like the cool providence of God
Yeah.
that us in our very consumeristic society now,
Hmm.
we need Advent more than we realize.
Yeah. I think that's a brilliant insight, because for so many people, there's this sort of massive expectation of what Christmas and the holidays are supposed to be. Like, I think, at least in our American context, we have this kind of image in our mind of Christmas as this kind of idyllic Norman Rockwell painting of a family coming together in total bliss, and it's this kind of moment where everything is right with the world. But in reality, right, that's not how a lot of people experience the
Yeah,
Christmas season, you know. That, just as you said, that there's so much stress, there's so much anxiety. For a lot of folks who don't have a, we could say, a perfectly healthy relationship with family members, or where there's wounds in their relationships
yeah,
or things of that nature, that kind of living up to that idealized vision of the holidays is impossible, or it's very hard, or it becomes actually a source of stress
yeah,
and even pain,
yeah,
for so many folks. So the beauty of the Advent season and all these disciplines that we're discussing about is that it takes that burden off of our shoulders and calls us back into humility and humbleness, and simply putting ourselves into a relationship with God, into his presence,
yeah,
right? Which is the real and true purpose, right,
Yeah.
of the holy days, right? Not the commercialization as you were talking about, or the materialism, or all these things that have come to, dominate what most people see or understand as the Christmas season. It takes us to the root of things, right?
Yeah.
It takes us to the foot of the manger, right?
Yeah.
So that is, I think, where Advent can be an incredibly healing and incredibly sanctifying practice for so many people during the Christmas season.
Yeah. So, how do you personally, what are your personal traditions with that?
Yeah. Well, I think this time is a time to really get back to, well, speaking, of course, as an Anglican, to really get back to the discipline and practice of the Book of Common Prayer. We know as Anglicans that the book offers us prayer for pretty much, right, all the major portions of the day:
Yeah.
morning, midday, evening, et cetera, et cetera, right? So this is a time, in my view, to really intentionally get back to the rhythms of prayer and worship and reading of scripture and
Yeah.
contemplation and meditation upon the things of God, you know. And when we focus on that, along with these other disciplines, such as fasting or things of that nature, which, we could all benefit from, I'm sure, all of those things, as I said, put us back into the presence of God and helps us to escape the chaos and anxiety that fills so much of life during ordinary time, as it
Yeah.
were, So how about you? What are some of the practices that you really enjoy during the Advent season?
Yeah, I think I always like whether it's Advent or Lent, just kind of using these as kind of like a spiritual pit stop,
Mm, yeah.
of like, okay, so it helps me do kind of a checklist of like, what are my spiritual rhythms right now?
Mm, mm,
So where do I need to put more effort in?
yeah.
Where do I need to step up? Um, so that's kind of what I use Advent for. And in the case of this, I can I try to take more time with specifically with Advent
Hmm.
because I think the remembrance of slowing down.
Yes.
So specifically with like silence and solitude,
Mm,
those are big things for me during Advent.
hmm.
That's just what Advent always reminds me of is just time to sit with God.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you guys out there, but silence is disturbing,
Mm.
right?
Well, it's unnatural
Oh
in
yeah.
our modern day society, right?
Like I always
Yeah.
have like earphone in, listen to a podcast as I
Yeah.
work, or
Yeah.
I would have animals running about in my house.
Mm,
So like the idea of blocking that all that out, which these days with all the animal part, I have to be very intentional
yeah.
of where I
Yeah.
go, um, and do all of that. But that's so like I try to once a week have set aside an hour to really just sit in
Mm,
that where I just don't talk.
mm,
I may bring a little fidget thing in there because sometimes it's hard for me to sit still.
sure.
Um, but I really try to just silence my mind
Mm,
and just give God the room to speak.
hmm.
And if he doesn't say anything for that whole hour, I don't think it's wasted
Right.
because it's also a training of a heart posture
Mm,
as well. So spiritually, those are my main things is kind of using it as a pit stop to realign myself and also a chance to really sit in silence and solitude.
hmm.
So that's what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Um, I also do something that you have on the table right here.
Hmm.
This is our little prop today. You know, our shameless plug for Bill Russell. This is also a great thing that our church puts on. So you can say it's a church tradition. It's our church's
Hmm.
tradition. Journey to Bethlehem. It's a devotional with some scripture and then a reflection and prayer. Um,
for each day of Advent.
Yeah, each day of Advent, and it gives everyone, an opportunity to really reflect on maybe some passages you never reflect on.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, I would say at least a good half of it is Old Testament.
Right.
A lot of good prophecies as well
Mm-hmm.
within that Old Testament. So it's good stuff for us to really reflect on. And the shameless part is like Michael and I both wrote in it. So um, you can try to, we don't put in there who has which days. So you can just try to guess
Mm-hmm.
as you've gotten to know it, get to know us a little more. That's the game I play with my youth.
Yeah.
See who the first one can guess. Usually it does get them because I can't have the answer on day one
Mm.
because that means you just flip through it just to
Right.
look at things and
Right.
try to
That's
find
right.
it. So it's usually the first after a week or two,
Yeah. Yeah.
or like the natural course of when I know my first one is in.
Mm.
If at that point, if they be like,
Mm-hmm.
so
There you go.
so that's always a fun little thing we do
Yeah.
in the youth group.
But yeah, I mean, I think although, like you said, it's a bit of a shameless plug, but I still think it's um, a beautiful practice for us here because this simple devotional is it's a work of the people.
Yeah,
It's a liturgical product, as it were. It's a work of members of this community for this
yeah.
community.
I think there's 10 different authors,
Right.
so you get a lot of different. Because sometimes if we hear from the same people over and over again, things become dull.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really beautiful when you have these different takes from different people,
Yeah,
because we need different voices so we can hear different things.
absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
that's like my intentional practice of being, a youth minister is like I enjoy going on mission trips and retreats because my students hear from more than just me.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and the same thing of like I reference Father Bob's sermon because I want them to hear more from my point of view, but also his. Like
Yeah.
he's getting from all different ends of the spectrum. So for us, that's like a practice we should never stop as a Christian
Hmm.
is hearing things from different people.
Exactly.
Because then if we hear from the same person over and over again, sometimes we just get lost in that go chamber.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. I
it's a
mean,
good practice.
yeah. And in so many ways, right? The members of our community are our greatest resource, right? And when we put together all of our different experiences of what God has done and use that as a lens through which to approach the scripture, it just creates such a rich experience,
Yeah.
for us to go through.
Yeah. Well, I thought we'd end with one, a little something more on the fun side.
Sure.
So, Michael, what are some of your favorite Christmas traditions? I just thought, it's
Yeah,
appropriate, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah,
we call it Advent in the church.
yeah.
The world calls it the Christmas season,
Hmm.
right? So, well, that's a fun way to end the episode today with
Yeah,
what are some of your favorite Christmas
yeah.
traditions that your family has?
Oh boy. Well, we have our kind of our set list of movies
Yeah.
that we go through pretty much every Christmas season, that we have to check off our list that have just become, these movies have just become so, integral to our experience of the holidays, but
Does your family have an obscure Christmas movie that's like the go-to?
Uh, I no, they're not. Well, maybe one might be slightly obscure, but everyone's familiar with A Christmas Carol, right?
Yeah.
The tale of Ebenezer Scrooge, right? We favor the 90s version with Patrick Stewart
Ah, that's
as
a great
that's
one. Oh,
yeah,
from TNT.
that's right.
We have that.
That's my
My,
personal favorite.
my
Yeah,
family's personal favorite is the Muppets version
I see.
with
I see.
Michael Caine.
Yeah.
So that's our favorite,
Yeah, yeah.
because that's I love just you know,
Mhm.
it's a musical.
Sure,
What goes wrong with
sure.
musicals? So
Yeah, and it is a timeless tale.
yeah,
It is really one of those films. Well, the story itself, of course, is one of those where you take something new from it every time you
yeah,
go through it. So that's something that we always enjoy during the
yeah.
holidays.
Our obscure movie is Christmas with the Cranks with
Hmm.
my family.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, since it's not a great on the
Yeah.
IMDb, but it's just one of those
Yeah.
inside family things that are just like we just watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
So Is there any other favorite traditions outside the
Mm,
movie list?
yeah. Well, we just always, I mean, since childhood, I just always remember going through the Christmas narratives, on Christmas Eve and reading those stories together as a family as kind of a precursor to everything else we did, on Christmas Eve and Christmas morning was making sure we ingested that narrative, of what this whole season was about, you know. And that's always been a kind of priceless tradition for our family.
Mm, mm.
Mhm.
Well, I think for myself, outside of movies, of
Mhm.
course, we'd always have these funny books
Mm.
that we would read. Because I grew up for the first portion of my life in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So
Mhm.
we had some
Mhm.
like Amish books with
Yeah.
some really funky stuff. I can't remember the name of some of the characters, but you
Mm.
know, some very Amish folklore. But outside
Mm.
of that, like we always outside of like it becomes like we opened a bakery at my house
Mm.
growing up. That's how this is one of my favorite traditions. I never did the baking. I just enjoyed and partook
Sure,
of all
sure.
the cookies, all
Yeah.
the pies,
Yeah.
all the different kind of desserts. Like they would
Hmm.
just show up and I'd be like, "Oh, this is tasty. This is great."
Yeah.
So always that tradition, but also one of my favorites, which we'll do, um, in 2 days because this is Wednesday, is that the day after Christmas or the day after Thanksgiving.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, because we honor and give thanks for what we have. Then
Hmm.
the next day we start the Advent Christmas season for
Yeah.
us with the decoration of the trees. We do it every
Hmm.
year.
Hmm.
Even as I've gotten married, my parents don't do the tree at their house till we come over
Mm.
and help set it up.
Yeah.
Um, which, of course, if you can imagine, over many years, there's many ornaments that have the collection has ever grown,
Right. That's
and
right.
just doing, helping around the house, helping my because my parents still live in the home that I've lived the majority of my life in.
Mm.
So it's always still cool to have those types of traditions that bring us together as a family.
Yeah.
Because those are the traditions that matter most to me, is the ones that bring us together as a family.
Hmm.
Because I think that's also, Advent is leading to the first family of our faith.
That's
Right?
right. That's right.
So um,
Hmm.
I think family, is just a very important part of the season.
Hmm.
So
No doubt.
those are the traditions that we always enjoy. So,
Yeah.
well, with that,
Mhm.
thank you all for watching. Remember, you always find us at 12 o'clock on Wednesdays, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook. Also, if you enjoy us, you can give us a rating on Spotify. You can like us on YouTube and Facebook, and you
Mhm.
can share us on Facebook. Those always help us out. If you enjoy us, that would help us grow our audience, and um, more people can find us, and
That's right.
maybe they'll get an answer answered,
Yeah.
or a question answered, I should say.
Hmm. Hmm.
So with that, I'm Henry.
I'm Michael.
See you.
God bless.